Right, so the Labour government under Keir Starmer and who they have chosen to attack publicly and not is drawing a bit of attention already, since it is those progressive voices, those with an actual desire to change things from how the Tories left them, who appear to be the focus of attacks from Labour figures and have been since the end of the election. And this has been enabled in no small part by rancid client journalists within our mainstream media, platforming those who lost their seats far more than the people who actually won them, doing a disservice to every viewer who voted for a different candidate because they wanted change. But equally, where a change in voter intention saw a different candidate, a different party win through, conspicuously, the private company masquerading as a political party called Reform UK Ltd hasn't earned any attacks from Labour at all that I've noticed. So what gives? Is it just because they took Tory votes? And if so, are Labour not guilty of enabling the far right by giving them a free pass? Right, so wasn't that a heartwarming clip to begin the video proper with, eh? All the Tories together, are they chummy? Are they friendly with each other? Look at them there. Party and deputy leaders having a good old laugh together whilst Rachel Reeves appeared deep in conversation with Jeremy Hunt behind them, presumably fishing for ideas. George Osborne obviously not available to her just that minute. She does like to seek his advice too. Little wonder Starmer welcomed 3 defecting Tories into his party, no questions asked, is it really? If ever there was a video clip to sum up the fact that nothing has changed insofar as to how this country is going to be run, that one ought to be on billboards everywhere to illustrate the point. And people should note in light of that clip the fact that Keir Starmer owes his supermajority entirely to the collapse of the Tory vote, because many of his own MPs who did get returned to Parliament, including Starmer himself, did so with much reduced majorities. Labour didn't take Tory votes by any means, lost many of their own. In fact, it turns out that more Tory voters in 2019 have died in the time leading up to this election than actually switched to Labour. Starmer's bunch, therefore, didn't so much win as hold on, and the goalposts of first past the post shifted enough to hand them the win anyway. It's like scoring a goal by letting the ball bounce off you rather than actually booting it in yourself. That said, of course, not all of Starmer's cronies got returned to Parliament, did they? Goodness knows we've seen enough of Jonathan Ashworth and Thangam Debonair venting their spleens on TV to know that, as losers of their seats, instead of the new incumbents to know all about that, of course. Ashworth notably attacking his pro-Gaza independent rival who defeated him, local optician Shaukat Adam, and Debonair accused her winning rival, Green Party co-leader Carla Denyer, of basically being a liar. But they've not been the only instances. So why are Labour so determined to attack the Greens and independents then? Well, they did eat into their vote, as well as stand for progressive politics and change, whereas Labour are just continuity as things are, business as usual, right down to the there's no money left mantra. 5 independent MPs got elected, they formed a pro-Gaza bloc in Parliament, and with Labour so ardently pro-Israel as they are, and in the pockets of the Israel lobby too, already shown by David Lammy rushing off to shake hands with war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu, and that U-turn, of course, in trying to get Netanyahu and his defence minister off the hook at the International Criminal Court, where arrest warrants for the pair are being sought. Germany has now joined the UK in trying to stop those arrest warrants shamefully, in yet another example of shouldn't you know better by now. This group are holding Labour accountable for this issue of Gaza and Israel, and I dare say Labour's pro-Israel leanings going forwards, the fact all of this group, with the exception of Jeremy Corbyn, come from ethnic minority backgrounds as well, I would like to think we'll see Labour being held to account as well for its hierarchy of racism. And of course weaponisation of racism, which Corbyn absolutely knows something or two about. But coming to the Greens, their mere existence in Parliament seems to trigger Labour more than anything. The fact there are now 4 Green MPs will be driving Labour mad. But the fact there could have been, and nearly were, far more of them than that will trigger them further, especially when the Green Party make no secret of the fact they want change. They want to tax wealth, where Labour want donors instead. They want to end the 2-child benefit cap, keeping 250,000 kids in poverty, where Labour claims to have no money, despite finding $3 billion a year just to give to Ukraine. And of course they could always tax wealth to raise it if they wanted to, and still give money to Ukraine. For every Labour spokesperson who crops up on the telly saying there's no money for this, That Labour would like to do this is literally defending an indefensible and completely dishonest political standpoint. Labour do not want to lift these kids out of poverty, otherwise they would just do it. The money is always there. Do you really think, after all, if Starmer ordered boots on the ground in Ukraine tomorrow, the funding wouldn't be there for it? As a prime example of green progressiveness, though, the very first early day motion of this Parliament has just been laid down. EDM number 1. And it was laid down by Green MP Ellie Chowns just yesterday on public ownership of water. I have just had a look at the motion as I was writing this, doing my research as I do, of which the first 6 signatories to an EDM are always considered the sponsors of it, and these consist of all 4 Green MPs, Ellie Chowns, Adrian Ramsey, Carla Denyer and Sean Berry, along with Jeremy Corbyn and Labour MP John McDonnell. Further to that, at time of writing, 3 more MPs have signed, independent MPs Iqbal Mohammed and Shaukat Adam, along with Labour's John Trickett. Say it all where progressive politics are: Greens, Independents and a couple of what remains of the Labour left. There could have been more than just those 4 Green MPs we have, as I said, though, as the Greens came second in a further 40-odd constituencies, which is a huge platform for them to build on going forwards. And if they continue to make the right moves, channels like this one will keep pointing that out, because frankly the mainstream media won't be telling you any of this. They will underreport the Greens, as they've always done previously. But where Labour are attacking the Greens for shaming them, Independents for doing likewise, whilst exposing the fact that party politics no longer has to be the way to get independents into Parliament, independent candidates, of course, ran many other Labour MPs close and came second to them, decimating majorities and making so many Labour seats that were seemingly safe before now extremely vulnerable. The same has not been done to Reform UK, though. Now, one easy explanation, obvious explanation, is that Reform are less a direct threat to Labour, since they mopped up most of those lost Tory votes, and the 5 MPs they have all taken seats were held by Tories in 2019. Clacton, Boston and Skegness, Great Yarmouth, Ashfield and South Basildon and East Thurrock as they are. It's worth noting, though, that whilst Clacton and Boston and Skegness saw Tory incumbents come second, and obviously Lee Anderson, the Leanderthal, 30p Lee, defected to Reform after winning that seat as a Tory previously in Ashfield, Great Yarmouth and South Basildon and East Thurrock both saw Labour come second despite previously being Tory held. Great Yarmouth, in fact, the former seat of a former Tory minister, Brandon Lewis. So these, certainly the last one, which the Reform MP only holds by a majority of 98, will be Labour targets next time. So in which case, why are they giving Reform a free pass? Because they hold target seats now. Because if it is simply a case of they take votes off the Tories and that's worth more to them than to keeping the Tories out of power, then frankly they're playing with fire. Labour seems set on not changing a damn thing from the Tories before them, serving not we the people of this country, but the establishment whose money and media help put them where they are, just as the Tories were before. Any favour extended to Reform UK in this manner won't be reciprocated to Labour, who, by doing very little any different from the Tories, are opening up that same vacuum the Tories did for another political party to fill, where by rights the progressiveness of independents and the Greens should fill that, if their policies and what they were saying and what they were doing was far better broadcast, that the media will suppress them instead. They certainly will not suppress the likes of Nigel Farage. When do they ever suppress Nigel bloody Farage? Labour risk opening the door to a Reform UK insurgents, media carrying on as they are already. 5 years of this could deliver the country to Farage on a plate, and if he absorbs the hard right rump of the Tories too, then we could have real issues on our hands before long. There's also an argument that Labour could be driven further to the right by Reform, seeking to head off populism by adopting populist moves. But when you've all the likability of a dose of the clap like Keir Starmer has, certainly doesn't possess Nigel Farage's performativeness, then he's going to fail at that. And in that line of thinking, I suppose, plus that clip I showed at the start, you could say that Starmer is only attacking the actual opposition in Parliament now. But he's opening the door to the far right if Labour continues to give Reform a free pass for the sake of them keeping those Tory voters split. Meanwhile, that authoritarian streak Starmer already has, another thing he has in common with Reform, who as a private company are completely dictated to by the whims of Farage, has just seen Welsh Labour completely implode. But if you thought it was only the resignation of the Starmeroid First Minister Vaughan Gething that was the story here, think again. There's a lot more to this story than at first glance. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.